Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Catherine Fife. I am the MPP for Waterloo. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Justice Committee here at Queen's Park. I'm honored to speak about my private member's bill, Lydia's Law, co-sponsored by MPP Vantoff, MPP Mamakwa, and MPP Kernahan. Lydia's Law calls for transparency and accountability in the handling of sexual assault cases in Ontario. With me are Sarah Castleman, the Executive Director at the Sexual Assault Centre of Waterloo Region, Brittany, a sister of one of the survivors in the Sloka case, and MPP Kernahan, who will be representing the 3 MPPs and allies who are co-sponsoring this important bill. In 2025 alone, 1,635 cases of sexual assault were disposed or stayed before trial, up from 1,326 in 2022. We're not going in the right direction. Why are so many cases of sexual assault being withdrawn or stayed before their trial date? Behind this number are survivors who will not get their day in court. For a government that claims to be tough on crime, the Ford government has denied justice to so many survivors and their loved ones. We know from listening to survivors that the court system continues to be a hostile place for women seeking justice. Remember that only 6% of sexual assault cases even get to court. Lydia's Law would require the minister to prepare a progress report on intimate partner violence and sexual assault cases annually. He would review the Victim Quick Response Program. It would enhance and ensure that every survivor has access to the Independent Legal Advice Program. And this act would remove all time limits for survivors who require mental health supports. As I table Lydia's Law today, I will be thinking of and holding in my heart the survivors of disgraced and disbarred former Dr. Sloka, who sexually assaulted 48 women. And these 48 women went to court only to find themselves being judged by a judge. More than 80% of sexual assaults go unreported because the justice system has proven to be a hostile place for survivors, one that unnecessarily re-traumatizes them. For the survivors who have the courage to come forward, court backlogs, unavailable courtrooms, and staffing shortages mean that many do not get their day in court nor see justice served. The bill is inspired by a young woman named Lydia, who shared her experiences navigating Ontario's broken justice system. Lydia and her mom told me that they do not want any other survivor to go through what they went through, and they asked me to help. It turned out that the Auditor General had already proposed that this legislation and these actions enshrined in the law be made possible. To date, the Attorney General has not done so, and even though these recommendations were made in 2019. Lydia told me, when we see decisions like the Sloka case, we wonder if 48 women are not believed, how can my voice matter? Lydia's story represents the story of so many survivors across Ontario, and on April 24th, 48 more women joined her in this struggle. It is time to restore faith in the justice system. Next, I will call upon Brittany to share her sister's perspective.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Brittany Wellington, and I am a mother, a wife, a daughter, an elementary school teacher, and a sister to one of the survivors of the Jeffrey Sloka case. I am here today to read a statement on behalf of my sister and implore the Ontario government to adopt Lydia's Law as a means of finally addressing our broken judicial system and unjust treatment of sexual assault victims. Before I read my sister's words, I want to reiterate the immense courage it has taken for Lydia and my sister to come forward with their experience and seek justice in a system that so clearly disregards women. With respect to the Sloka case, our family, as well as the community at large, is grappling with the gut-wrenching fallout of an acquittal on all 48 counts of sexual assault that took 4.5 years to be delivered in a judge-only trial. Though our fight with this particular case is just beginning, my sister is desperate to share what she went through in the court system so that the public can understand just how necessary Lydia's Law is if we want to see systemic change. These are my sister's words. Quote, "Sitting in that Kitchener courtroom across from my abuser, forced to be vulnerable and courageous while being ridiculed by the defense, felt like a violation of every cell in my body. It is fundamentally inhumane. Since that day, my life has been held hostage by every incoming call and new email in my inbox. For over 4 years, I have lived in the tension of bracing for impact, waiting for a relief that ultimately never came. Once I entered the court system, I was forced to play a game where the rules were always changing. Timelines shifted without reason. Significant dates passed in silence, and I was left alone to replay the trauma. Jeffrey Slocum took so much from me, and as a result, I was given no reprieve, only constant processing and unbearable pain. 4.5 years of tears, trial dates, and traumatic revelations have resulted in a body rewired by stress and a total absence of justice. I have lost years I can never get back to the very system that claimed it would help me. The court system is like a slow motion grinding down of the spirit that often forgets the human at the center of the file. Lydia's Law is our only chance of relief. Survivors of sexual assault deserve to be heard and receive justice in a timely manner. The Auditor General report made this clear to the Ontario government in 2019, yet here we are in 2026 asking people across Ontario to join us in fighting this never-ending injustice. Survivors of sexual assault deserve immediate access to the Independent Legal Advice Program, as well as the Victim Quick Response Program. With a system this broken and timelines for verdicts this disastrous, it is the absolute bare minimum our government can provide. Beyond that, survivors need the 5-year time limit for mental health supports removed if they experience assault by a member of a regulatory body. When my 5-year limit was fast approaching with no verdict in sight, I had to reach out to Catherine Fife and her team for help to remove this cap for all victims in the Slocum case. I recognize my privilege in having contacts I could access in this situation, and I know full well that many individuals would not have the knowledge or capacity to change this outcome for themselves. Now is the time to come together and fix this deeply flawed system. With the constant stream of news stories about violence against women, we have the opportunity as a province to show that we value survivors, and we want them to receive the justice and support they so desperately need. My 3 sisters and I refuse to live in a world where my daughter and my niece are subject to such a dehumanizing system. So I ask you, if not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Castleman. I'm the Executive Director of the Sexual Assault Support Center of Waterloo Region. I've had the honor of being at our center for the last 24 years. Since 1989, our center has been supporting survivors of sexual violence and working to prevent sexual and gender-based violence through education, advocacy, and collaboration. I'm also here today as a member of the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres, a network of community-based sexual assault centres who are advocating for survivors and leading social change in our province. I'm honored to stand here once again with MPP Catherine Fife and others in support of Lydia's Law. This bill is about transparency and accountability, and it's about whether survivors in Ontario can have any sort of confidence that if they come forward, the systems meant to protect them will actually show up. We know that only 6% of sexual assault survivors report to police, and of those that report, only 10% result in conviction. Is it any wonder that many survivors and their advocates do not believe that our legal system is a justice system? As you've heard, Waterloo Region has just lived through the verdict in the Slocum trial, one of the largest sexual assault trials in our community's history. After years of investigation, testimonies, delays, legal motion, and unimaginable emotional labor, 48 survivors, all women, were once again reminded that coming forward does not mean that there will be justice. Survivors deserve better than a system that requires exceptional resilience to be heard, that fails to treat them with respect, and that so often falls short of meaningful accountability. This is exactly why Lydia's Law matters. The legislation would require the Attorney General to publicly report every year on progress made in implementing key recommendations from Ontario's Auditor General related to handling of sexual assault cases. These recommendations have sat on paper for far too long. It would also ensure that reports are reviewed publicly through the Standing Committee on Justice Policy. Because accountability only matters if the public can see it. Because survivors shouldn't have to wonder whether lessons are being learned behind the scenes. And because trust in our justice system cannot be rebuilt through silence. I'll also add that accountability in our courts means very little if survivors can't access support in their communities. Ontario's community-based sexual assault centres are critically underfunded. It's not political theatre. When you adjust for population growth and inflation, just to provide the same level of service, provincially funded service, we were funded to provide in 2010, our centre would require a 57% increase in provincial funding today. Not to expand, not to innovate, not to meet growing demand, simply to stand still. And yet survivors continue to come, because when the systems fail, community-based sexual assault centers are still there, answering crisis calls, providing counseling in groups, walking survivors through legal processes, going to hospital visits, and standing by their side in the road towards healing. I want to thank Catherine Fife for her leadership and tenacity in not letting this issue disappear. And I urge every member of the legislature support Lydia's Law and properly fund community-based sexual assault centers. Survivors are relying on them in our communities. Because survivors in Ontario deserve far better than what this system is delivering today.
Hi everyone, I'm Terrence Kernahan, MPP for London North Centre, and I want to thank you all for being here today. Criminals should not be walking free because Ontario's justice system has failed. In 2025, 1,635 cases were thrown out because time ran out due to delays. As legislators, we have a moral and an ethical responsibility to act. Lydia's Law is a much-needed step towards a justice system that works and closes the loophole that allows criminals to escape accountability. Men have a role to play. Sexual violence is not simply a women's issue. It's a massive problem that affects everyone, and it means that men have to stand up. Being an ally means listening to survivors. It means believing survivors. It means challenging attitudes and systems that let violence against women go unchecked. We must take a collective responsibility for building a culture where justice is not delayed, where justice is not denied, and one where respect, consent, and safety are non-negotiable. As a society, we must confront harmful behaviors, reject toxic masculinity, and teach boys and young men that consent, respect, and accountability are mandatory. I want to thank MPP Catherine Fife for her incredible leadership on this issue. It's an honor to co-sponsor this legislation along with MPP Vantoff and MPP Memakwa. Lydia's Law provides an effective and timely solution to the massive problem of injustice in our system. It presents a very simple question. Is the government okay with criminals walking free? Conservatives like to talk a lot about justice and safety, but will their actions match their words? Voting in support of Lydia's Law will show that they stand for survivors and that they stand for justice. Anything else would render their words meaningless. Thank you.
So I'm happy to take any questions from the gallery if you have any.
Catherine, it looks like this bill was introduced in 2024 and then went to standing committee. Can you kind of put in your own words why you think the bill kind of didn't go forward at that time?
Well, actually, the day before we were supposed to debate in the legislature, and we had 200 plus advocates coming to Queen's Park, the government shut down debate. It dispensed the bill to committee without debate. This has only happened 3 times in the history of this legislature. So in my view, the government did not want to debate what's really happening in our court system. They do not want to hear from survivors. And they're very sensitive to the fact that, they talk tough on issues of crime and justice, but they don't deliver. So at the time, you'll remember, the House Leader was Paul Calandra. He said that this would expedite the bill. In fact, I showed up at Justice Committee often and asked when the bill would be called. It was never called. So the government intentionally sent this bill to Justice Committee to die. This is not an issue they want to delve into. And this Attorney General in particular is quite sensitive to this. The Attorney General has, while in committee, talked about, how they're, digitalizing the court system. We want the court system to be responsive in a timely manner. The Sloka case took almost 5 years, right? 5 years to get justice is a hellish experience for those survivors. Lydia herself waited almost 2 years for justice. During that time period, we don't talk about, the lives of survivors, what they experience, the stress on their family, the productivity that they lose as like an engaged person in society. So this government is sensitive to the issue. If they dispense this bill again, which was quite traumatic for survivors, it signaled that the government did not want to listen. So we're setting the marker down hard this time. I have 3 male co-sponsors to the bill. I want to expand the conversation about what violence is doing to our society, and I want that conversation to include strong allies like MPP Vantoff, Mamakwa, and Kernahan.